I feel like a complete mess. I keep changing settings and angles and lighting, and how about we just refer to it as hot mess? Hi BookTube, it's Kim at Middle of the Book March. I'm going to keep moving this. That's me moving the tripod because I can't get the best angle and the best lighting because I decided to change settings today. What was I thinking? I have a tag, and it is the Philosophy of Reading tag. This was originated by Brandon at Brandon's Bookshelf, whose link will be below. And I was tagged by Britta Bowler. This is one of those tags that booktubers love because none of us have to walk around our house gathering books. It's just talking. It's just questions and answers. But it's a long one. There's 20 pretty cool prompts. And I'm going to get going. And, you know, one of the other benefits of these types of tags is you get to know me a little bit better. You get to think about what your answers would be to some of these questions. So let's get going. Number one, what's most important? A good character, plot, or message? Back in time, I probably would have answered character. I like books that don't necessarily have a plot, but the more I read, the more I really appreciate great character, great plot. And I have to say, I do like a nice, tidy wrap-up at the end of a book. Some people say, I don't need a happy ending or everything's tied in a bow, happily ever after. And it doesn't have to be that, but I love a climax and a conclusion. That makes sense. So, combination of great character development, great story. Number two, should one read books about ideas or opinions they disagree with? Absolutely. How do we learn? How do we open our minds? How do we form new ideas? How do we learn about other people? It would be really closed up, and we would keep ourselves so sheltered if we didn't expose ourselves to new ideas and ideas we may disagree with. It actually is kind of a mind exercise to read other people's perspectives. So definitely. Number three, as tech advances, what do you think will be the role of books? If you're talking about paper books, I honestly value them more after the advent of the ebook and the Kindles and the Nooks and all kinds of e-readers, audiobooks, which I really am enjoying these days. I never used to. But all of the technological way to consume a book, I value paper books more. I've never owned more physical books than I do now, even with all of the other ways I can access books. And I think it's just going to continue. When the e-readers came out, there were a lot of, brick and mortar bookstores that went out of business. And I think bookstore owners panicked, thinking, what is this going to do to our industry? But I believe there was a boomerang effect where people didn't love the experience of e-reading every time. And we're now back to paper books. I think that'll continue. Number four, how important are summaries, review, and art in your book choosing? Summaries and reviews, I don't want a summary. All I want is to know enough about the book to know if I'm going to be interested in it or not. There are certain types of stories I just am not interested in. I try not to read reviews until I'm done with a book to see what other people thought of it. And when I look at the blurb or the back of a book, I only want to read a few sentences because quite often those spoil the story. What's the role of art in my book choosing? If you've watched me for any length of time, I am so superficial with the way a book looks. And I've talked about that at length. I'll maybe add a few links of some of my own videos. Number five, should one ever skim or scan a book? Absolutely, especially if you're a student. You need to know how to quick read and how to speed read and skim and know which words you can skip and which passages. You don't have to read the whole thing. That's really important for a full-time student. And it's important for any student because you cannot possibly get it all done. Especially if you're like an English literature student or a college student or a grad student with any amount of lots of dense reading. You got to learn how to skim. I have skimmed books that I've been reading for pleasure because I do have to talk about them, but I'm not enjoying them. And I can pick out large chunks that, I'm going to blow right through that. Should you do it? In certain context, but it's a great skill to learn. Let's see. Number six, should reading always be enjoyable? No. I think the act of reading is enjoyable. I think the build up to reading is enjoyable. There are plenty of books that are very enjoyable, but you're not always going to enjoy the content of every book. There are books that are important that you may not enjoy, especially nonfiction. If you're reading to learn, if you're reading to get history, if you're reading somebody's memoir, those might not always be pleasant to read. They may be painful or full of anger or a perspective that you don't agree with. But the act of reading, I think, is always enjoyable. Number 7, is it important to be well-read? Well-read means something different to everybody. It's very subjective. The acceptable definition of well-read is you've read across all genres. You've read the classics. You've read the Western canon, which I really just don't agree with. You've read ancient classics. You've read modern classics. You've read, whatever, different genres. And that's the accepted definition of what well-read means. But if a person could read only one genre, but they read a whole bunch, they're a reader. A teenager could be reading YA fantasy all the time. They're a reader. It may not matter if they're well-read or not. And I think it's important to each person differently. There should be no judgment for anybody who hasn't blown through the Western canon. I'm going to also link a video or videos from Lukash from Cruel Reader's Thesis, who did some videos on this very topic. Number 8, what is your book buying process? Oh, I've talked about this a lot. I love buying used books. I love haunting library sales. I love going book thrifting. I love used bookshops. I love supporting local business owners. I love buying used books online. I buy bargain books. Process? Do I have a process? I don't know if I have a process. I have really discerned which places I'm going to go that I'm always going to hit a jackpot. I do buy a lot of used books online. I've told you that before. I have bought new books. I have one subscription to Book of the Month. I've bought new books online. That's about it. I buy books based on people's recommendations who I trust or authors that I know I love. That's about it. I hope that answers the question. Number 9, what is your reading process? Not quite sure of the meaning of this question, but reading. I read what I feel like. I don't often create TBRs. Unless it's a theme month on BookTube, I don't often create TBRs. I don't like that pressure. I don't like that authority looming over me of a TBR. I love to shop my shelves and I love to pick what I feel like. I often gravitate and I often switch back and forth in genres. So if I finished a romance novel, I might go to nonfiction. If I finished a memoir, I might go to a crime novel. If I finish that, I may go to, whatever. I may go to a fantasy novel. So I kind of go back and forth trying to fit every type of book in. Number 10, how do you use what you read? Most of the time it's for my own edification. It's for my own enjoyment, learning, discernment, whatever it is. How do I use it? I learn something with every book I read, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. It makes me more articulate. It makes me more, knowledgeable. It fills me with more information, helps me start and maintain conversations. It fills me with more empathy. It shows me different perspectives. How I use all that is just being able to be a more critical thinker and a better conversationalist. And it helps me go forward to want to learn more and more and more of something. And maybe I can use that in my personal world, in my personal life, to create positive change in the things that I think need it. Number 11, if you could download a book to your brain, would you still read? If I could download a book to my brain, I would never have to read for any school degree ever. And I would do that if I was a student, or while I was a student, I would have done that. Would I still read? Yeah, because of the act of reading is pure joy to me. And I would always read. I love turning pages. I love reading words. I love visually reading the things. I do like audiobooks when I can hear certain voices and inflections and accents. So yes, I would definitely still read. Number 12, what are your views on rereading a book? I've only reread a handful of books. I don't often do that because I feel like I'm under the gun. I got to read all the books in my lifetime. And so I don't often reread. There are several books I have. I have reread Beloved by Toni Morrison, The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, The World According to Garp by John Irving. There are many books I do want to reread, especially George Eliot's novels. But I don't often do it. Because like I said, there's just too many other books and they're waiting for me. Number 13, what makes a book good? Very good technical writing, lyrical, artistic writing, a great use of the perfect word in a sentence that's not bloated with unimportant details, great characters, whether protagonists or antagonists, character development, great transitions between scenes in a book. And I do love a good climax, and I do love a good wrap-up at the end of a book. What makes a book bad? Number 14, the opposite of everything I said. And two of the worst crimes a book can commit, in my opinion, cliches and similes. If I'm reading a book and in the first 10 pages there's 2 similes, that book is going to get thrown to the side and DNF'd fast. I hate it. I can't stand cliches. I have read so many books that have the cliche, they went as far as the crow can fly. I cannot stand it. And when you add certain cliches, you will date your story. And bad book, bad book. Certain books need to have some depth, and if they don't, it's a bad book. Especially if it's a memoir or nonfiction that's history. Give me some depth. Don't stay on a superficial level. Give me some backup. Give me the meat of something. If you don't, it's a bad book. Number 15, how do you feel about not finishing a book? Do it all the time. I DNF like crazy, and I learned to feel far less guilty about it from your favorite Empress of Bailing, Sean the Book Maniac. I do it all the time. Life is too short. There are too many books. I DNF all the time. Number 16, should the author's personal life matter at all? It matters to me, and it doesn't matter to everyone. I can't, in good conscience, buy a book from an author who is homophobic, transphobic, misogynistic, offensive to anybody. Well, I'm not going to say that. If a book, especially a novelist, is just blatantly racist or any of those other things that I've already mentioned, if they are a person who has been accused or convicted of a sexual crime or crime against children or that type of thing, I can't pick up their book. I can't spend money supporting a book like that. There are certain authors who, kind of the mid-century misogynists, I have avoided their books. That type of thing. It does matter to me. It doesn't matter to everybody the same way. Number 17, if you could only read one genre for the rest of time, what would it be? I initially thought classics, but then I realized quickly that if I would be severely limiting the works I would be reading. If I say classics, I will probably be reading books by white male authors for the rest of time. There are plenty of classics written by women, but let's face it, most classics are written by white people. I would never be able to read books by people of color, by people of all different sexualities and genders. I wouldn't have that variety. So my real answer is fiction, because I believe that genre and all of its subgenres gives me the most variety, the most perspectives, and I would never run out of things to read. Number 18, do you ever read a book without knowing anything about it? I usually know enough to know if I'm going to have an interest in the story or if it's nonfiction. A lot of times, what I appreciate with nonfiction titles is a lot of times the subtitle will give me enough information to make me see if I'm going to have any interest in the topic or not. For fiction, I only want to read a couple of sentences in the blurb to see, am I going to be interested in the atmosphere, in the setting, in the chronology, in the type of characters. So I want to know as little as possible. but I don't know if I've ever read one where I know nothing at all. Let's see. Number 19, what author, genre, series, or culture can you just not get into? Horror. I don't read horror. I don't like violence and gore, and I don't like being scared. I don't, I'm not a Stephen King fan. I don't gravitate towards Stephen King books. Dean Koontz. I did read some James Patterson back in the day, and it was kind of gross and gory and violent. Stuff like that. I read almost every other genre. Number 20, do you think everyone should read, and why? Of course I do. Every person in the world. However, I am acutely aware that my ability to read and the time that I can devote to reading are privileges. And I would love, if I did not have to worry about making a living or, devoting my time to a full-time job, I would love to volunteer in literacy training. And I have looked into that in the past, but in my general area, I would not be able to do that without a teaching credentials or an advanced degree. And I don't have either of those in a reading certification education role. But I would love to help people learn how to read. Not only just for enjoyment, although that's just such a warm goal, a joyous goal, but for people to have a better opportunities in life. People who are illiterate, who have never learned to read, are at a severe disadvantage. And I would love to be able to create some positive change in that. Should everybody read for pleasure? Absolutely. And, when you do, go on BookTube and subscribe to everybody. That's it for the prompts. Who do I want to tag? I have 5 booktubers I want to tag. Alice's Giant Bookshelf. Cousin from Always Doing, Sonia at An Enthusiastic Reader, Ange's Book Chatter, and Beth Ann Berninga Sokolar. You are all tagged. If you've done it or don't feel like doing it, there's no pressure whatsoever. Do it at your leisure. Let me know in the comments below what you think or what any of your answers would be, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.